Welcome to Journey Through the Gate, your paranormal portal podcast, as we delve into the many questions and wonders brought on by the supernatural experience. What's on the other side of the gate? Let's find out together. Welcome to this side of the gate, and tonight we're going to have a really good time. I have some very special people with me on this side, so let me go ahead and get them on. I have my co-host. I have Mr. Steve Stockton with us tonight. Say hi, Steve.
Hi, Cisco. How are you?
Oh, great. So glad you could be with us tonight because this is really right up your history alley.
Thank you for having me, and I'm excited. Yeah, this is going to be great.
I'm so excited as well. So tonight we have what I think is one of the quality podcast has really set the bar for a podcast in the paranormal or any other way. I've been listening and I've been a big fan for a long time. It takes our love for history and then it goes bump. And that's right. I have Miss Diane Student from History Goes Bump tonight. Welcome to this side of the gate, Diane.
Well, I'm so glad to be joining you, Cisco and Steve. I'm very excited to talk to you.
Oh, it's just exciting. Right. It's so wonderful. Tell us a little bit about what got you started on this fabulous podcast. And I must say that anybody that I've ever talked to that's listened, you are one of their favorites. I mean, they just love the format and the way you do everything. It's just fabulous.
The production quality, it sounds like something you'd hear on NPR. It's fabulous.
Well, thank you. It took a lot of time and practice and errors to figure out how to do it, but I'm glad that everybody's enjoying the production value now.
It's wonderful. It's just wonderful. The history, what made you think about, I mean, it seems like a normal thing to put together. I mean, obviously, if you've got ghosts that was from the past, you've got history. Now, you take it from history, and then you go into the ghosts kind of, sort of.
Well, I have always loved the weird side of everything. I've always been kind of a quirky person. So ever since I was a kid, I liked, In Search of and sightings and unsolved mysteries. And then my mother was a historian. So she taught me this love of history. And anytime I would go into any cities, I always would do a ghost tour because to me, that's the best way to get the history. Because not only do you get the general history, but then you get the seedy side and the fun side of that history as well.
Absolutely.
So that's basically what my podcast is. It's, the tagline is Ghost Tour for the Theater of the Mind. And it's just me basically bringing a ghost tour to people on a podcast just because that's something that I've always loved ever since I was a kid.
Wow. What a great idea. And boy, does it play well. It really does. I love all the old music. I think one of my favorite, I'll never get tired of hearing the song that you play right before you go back in time. And I just love that big band feel. And it really does take you there. It's just really well done. And I can just imagine all the wonderful places that you've, if you didn't get to visit them physically, you've had guests on and they kind of take you through, like you said, that tour and take you through the ghosts and different history of, it was just wonderful. You did one recently that was near and dear to my heart, and that was Asbury Park, New Jersey. And it was wonderful. And it's only a couple of towns away from me, and it's just seeped in, you say seeped in history isn't everywhere, but it really is, completely. It's just hauntings everywhere you go, and they have wonderful ghost tours there. You're right there on the beach, and you have the sinking of the Morrill Castle, which was just tragic, and a lot of people don't hear about it. And you brought it up in the episode with your guest, who I thought was wonderful, by the way. It's absolutely as tragic as the Titanic, yet not many people have heard about it. And it really did change the town forever, not just the lives that were affected by the sinking and all the lives that were lost there, but the bodies were laid out in the Paramount Theater that's right there on the boardwalk, still stands today, very active today. Lots of bands play there and lots of other attractions. And people came from miles and miles and miles away to see this ship that was wrecked right there on the beach. And then, of course, others came to claim the dead, so to speak, identify the bodies. It was just such a tragedy. And of course, anything with that kind of energy is just going to cause hauntings. It's quite amazing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's quite amazing. It's quite amazing. And it's just sad to walk through there. You see a big, huge plaque about it. And you just, going to a town that's not changed. It's changed an awful lot over the years for sure. But the same buildings were there. And anytime you walk into a downtown of any little town or big city, you can almost feel that history that happened before, and I just think I'm right there with you. I just think that's amazing. And you and Steve have something in common. Now, you're going to have to pronounce this word for me, Diane. It's tapophile. I can't get it right. Tapophile. I can't say it.
It's a taphophile. It's a person who loves cemeteries.
There you go.
Right on.
There you go. And Steve does too. What have been some of your favorites, Diane, that you've gone to?
Oh, wow. It's so hard to really pick a favorite because they're all unique in some way. But if I had to say the best one that I feel like I've ever been through is Bonaventure in Savannah, Georgia. Just gorgeous. It doesn't have as many mausoleums as other cemeteries do, but the monuments that are there, and anytime you go into a cemetery, especially here in the South, and you see the Spanish moss just hanging in these old live oaks, it's just the way that a cemetery should be.
Yes. Yeah. And, creepy for sure. But I've heard a lot of people when you've gone in there to different cemeteries and you do a lot of live, from different cemeteries. And you find that a lot of people go in and they get very solemn too. They start reading these tombstones and you start thinking about the people that were there. And here in our local one, there's quite a few famous people that are in a very old cemetery not far from my house. And every year they go through and have like a living history within the cemetery. And a person, actors from local colleges and local drama clubs will dress as that person and stand by the tombstone, the grave of that person, and speak as them and act as them and tell their story. It's just a wonderful thing to go through. I don't know how the people in the ground in the actual grave feel about it, but the people going really enjoy that. And I think that's just an amazing way of looking at it. And when you're going through and you're doing stories about it, it does bring their story to life, so to speak. It's very interesting.
Well, yeah. When you walk through a cemetery, that's what I love about tombstones is that they each tell a story, like you said. And some of the stories are so tragic, especially when you see a family that may have 4 of their children's names listed on one tombstone, and you can see that they died within weeks of each other because, say, yellow fever swept through their family. It's just, you look at something like that, and it does make you pause for a moment and just think about what that must have been like for them back then.
Mm-hmm. And there's a definite difference between going in with a reverence. We've all, as kids, gone and done dares in high school, or, you want to see who's going to get scared first. We've all done stuff like that. But now it seems like I hear more and more that go through it with that reverence of just remembering. And, I think people misunderstand. I think everybody thinks that cemeteries is going to be where you find a lot of ghosts. And I just find that I don't think that's as true as people think. I think that maybe they're just not hanging out there as much. You might get 1 or 2, and who knows? There's always an exception to the rule. But ghosts seem to be more drawn back to a house they lived in or a place that they were, all the time, that kind of thing. I don't find that many in it, but you have a story that I know you'd like to tell Diane about, Steve, that it's one of my favorites. When you visit a cemetery as a kid.
And that was when I was in high school, and a friend and I had overheard that a group of cheerleaders was planning to do a little initiation there and go into a Copper Ridge Cemetery in Knoxville, Tennessee. It's an old cemetery. There's an old Masonic lodge on the property, or there was. It's gone now. Just a really creepy place. And it was one of those things, you went by it every day on the school bus, and there was all kinds of stories and legends about it. So we heard that they were going to be there that night. We got there early and hid in the trees, intent on scaring them. Sure enough, they showed up. They started walking into the cemetery in a little tight-knit pack there. We dropped down out of the trees and essentially chased them out. And we noticed off to our right, there was another person or something helping chase people out of the cemetery. And to this day, have no idea who or what it was, but there was something else in there with us. So we ended up getting just about as scared as the cheerleaders, I think.
I bet that taught you a lesson, but oh my goodness. I've never heard a story like that before.
Isn't that something?
Yeah.
And that just goes to show you that if they are hanging out, if there are ghosts in cemeteries, they like to have some fun too.
Yeah, that one had a
right,
lot of
Cisco.
stories. There was somebody with a cape seen running around in there, somebody stabbing a grave with a knife. There were unexplained lights and things, and there was always something going on there in that cemetery.
Isn't that something? Isn't that something? Maybe that's not one you want to go visit, huh, Diane?
Yeah, and I agree with you, Cisco. I think it doesn't seem like there's enough energy in a cemetery for spirits. So, and I wouldn't want to hang out with my dead body either. So
Right.
there are a few cemeteries that are haunted, but when you think of the thousands of cemeteries that there are across the world, there's very few that have any ghost stories connected to them.
I find that's absolutely true. Absolutely true. Okay, with all these episodes, Diane, that you have done, what have been some of your favorites? You tell us the story. What do you want to talk about as far as episodes? I know they're all your babies, and I know they're all your favorites. They have to be, because if I had to pick an episode that was my favorite to do, I'd have to think about it. But, the different places that you've gone to see through other people's eyes, what are some of your favorites?
I always tell people the one I'm working on right now, because that's the one that's the most in my brain.
Right.
But really, my favorite episodes to do are like the ones that I do when I'm on a road trip or of a location that I've actually been to, because I can give people perspective from my own eyes. I mean, I love having people on with me, and my show is very unique in that generally all of my guests are my listeners. I don't have professionals on or necessarily authors. These are just my listeners who suggest a place, and I say, hey, you've been there, you've had experiences, why don't you join me?
Right.
And so I can get it through their eyes, but I really love it when I have it my own experience. Like, you can hear stories about Waverly Hills Sanatorium from all kinds of people out there, but until you're actually in it yourself and then you have an experience, it's like, whoa.
Right.
And then you're able to convey that to the listeners. So those are my favorites. So Waverly Hills Sanatorium would definitely be one of my favorite episodes that I've done.
Have you been there?
Yes, we did a live show from Louisville, Kentucky, and we thought, wouldn't it be fun if we connected on to the end of it, all of us going over and doing a tour at Waverly Hills Sanatorium. And so we had a huge group. There was like over 60 of us that went over there and did the tour together.
Wow. And what was your experience with it as far as just walking into a place like that? See, that's one thing. I've gone to a lot of places, but I think I would have a problem going into a place where so many people suffered, whether it be a prison or, that's a lot of energy. How did you feel walking up into that?
The one benefit I have is I tell people I'm as sensitive as a rock. So when I walk into places, I don't really feel much of the energy there. Whereas, when we walked in with some other people into Waverly Hills, they would say, oh, well, the fourth floor made me feel really sad or depressed, or I felt very uncomfortable. And I walk into it and I don't feel anything. So for me, it doesn't really bother me as much. I was a little apprehensive because I'd heard so many stories about it, and some of them are kind of frightening and creepy. Mm-hmm. And so I wasn't really sure what to expect. So I have a little bit of fear sometimes when I go into places that have these really well-known, terrifying stories connected to them. Mm-hmm. But for the most part, it doesn't really bother me going into them so much. So so far I have not been afraid going into a place. I need to knock on some wood because I know I keep tempting the spirits just by saying that. But
I know. I was hearing you tell on one of your latest ones today, and you were saying that you're not scared because you've not had a frightening experience. And there's a lot of people that just aren't going to. I mean, if you don't have that I don't know what you want to call it, that sixth sense or whatever it is. Sometimes you can be in a room with somebody and you're looking at a full-on apparition and they're not seeing it. And I don't know how to explain that. It has to do with energy or maybe that ghost just doesn't want that person. I don't know. But if that's the case, then you're in a great position to get into these places and not be stopped by fear. You're more inquisitive and you want to know about it. And that's so cool. I'd have a problem walking into Waverly. I know I would. It would probably drain me for days. How about you, Steve? Have you ever been there? Have you ever been to Waverly?
No, I haven't been there. And grew up not too far from there in Knoxville, Tennessee, but never made the trip. But like you, it's one of those places that I don't think I would be that comfortable going there. I wouldn't be scared so much as just negatively impacted because I've experienced that before with places like that were still in operation.
Right. Now, I know you have been someplace that Diane did a fantastic episode on. In fact, I listened to it twice. It was just so intriguing. The history on it was wonderful in Las Vegas. Now, Steve, tell Diane where you used to work.
I was the in-house photography lab manager at Bally's.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So
why don't you tell her some of the stuff?
Experience, yeah. In the photo lab there, it was in the old part that had been the MGM, and there were doors that wouldn't stay shut, lights that either wouldn't stay on or off. And one night I was sitting there getting ready to start work, had two of my employees that had shown up earlier, and there was I can only describe it as a black mass. It looked like a small cloud, but in the room, came out of one wall, went past us, and went into the other wall. And I wasn't going to say anything because I've experienced stuff in the past, and I know, like Cisco was saying, sometimes I see things that other people don't see. But these two kids were like, "Did you see that? Oh, my God." And they actually left and didn't come back. I had to call across the street to Caesars to get some extra help. But there were just a lot of experiences there and just strange goings on, things that couldn't be explained. And I loved every minute of it.
Well, Las Vegas seems like a place that's just ripe for hauntings with all the history that's there. And then you have violence and crime and all this other stuff going on.
Right. And all the
we
killings.
Got the Flamingo. Yeah. And then one of the houses that I rented at one time was built in the 30s, which, if you know the history of Vegas, there basically wasn't anything there in the 30s except for downtown. And this was about 3 or 4 miles from downtown proper, so it would have been in the middle of nowhere when it was built. Creepy house. It had a hidden room behind a bookcase, and there was a lot of I had a photography studio in the basement, and there was a lot of activity there. A lot of times the models would complain about being touched or scratched, or they would hear somebody whispering in their ear.
I bet.
And, I had people that would show up for a portfolio shoot that left and never came back. So it was an interesting place to live. Probably the most active haunted house I've ever lived in.
Diane, you were saying something in your episode about how that fire started. I thought that was so interesting. Do you remember that? It was something about it happened in the kitchen, did it not? And it was something that started in the wall or something, and then it just went through when everybody was asleep.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember, but it seemed like it went through the ventilation system. I don't know if it wasn't built properly, but it just went up through all of the vents, and that's why it was so deadly to people, because you can imagine if you've got the fire and the smoke going up through the vents while people are sleeping, they're completely unaware that they've got smoke coming into their room.
And at that time, there were no requirements for fire alarms or sprinkler systems in Las Vegas.
And yeah, you have that problem too. Exactly.
Can you imagine? Didn't you say, Steve, that like almost like a fireball came through the actual casino or something?
Yeah, the person that I heard telling the story, and it was on one of the ghost tours, like Diane was talking about, fascinating. And he was talking about that there was literally a fireball that swept through the casino, and that there were people literally burned to death while still sitting at the gaming tables and slot machines.
Yeah, so
And then you had people in the upper floors diving out of the windows, especially on the side, the Koval Street side of Bally's. People went out the windows and were hitting the sidewalk over there.
Mm. You imagine. And have a fireball. Didn't you, Steve? There was a poor man. He must have been in shock. But did you say it came through so fast it pretty much burned all his clothes off and he just...
Yeah, that was they told that on the ghost tour, that the people at Caesars were across the street were watching the security cameras, watching the fire. And they said they see a guy coming out. He's basically, all his clothes are burnt off or hanging in shreds except for his underwear. He comes across the street, walks into Caesars, and I think it was either the roulette or the blackjack table that he went to and put down a sizable bet. And they were asking, don't you want medical attention? Whatever. He's like, no, today's my lucky day. I survived that fire. I'm going to win a lot of money.
In true Las Vegas spirit, everybody.
Yeah, that was told for the truth, but it's that's totally Vegas for you.
Wow. Isn't that something? The stuff that we hear doing what we do, it's just, it never ceases to amaze me. The stories, it just flabbergasted me. Now that's our country. I know, Steve, you were real interested in some of the Philippines stuff, that the episode that Diane did on the Philippines. Do you remember much of that, Diane? It's such a different culture. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Any of the countries that are over in that area, over in Asia, you don't get as many ghost stories as you do legend stories, which are just these bizarre, I don't even know that you could call them monsters, quote unquote monsters, but they have a lot of interesting things. And it makes you wonder how many of those stories have carried over here and gotten developed into other things. They have vampiric type creatures. They have this thing called a Capri. And it's this big, hairy man that lives at the top of these big trees in the Philippines. So you kind of wonder, is this where the stories of Bigfoot might have come from or something? But what's really unique about this creature is that he usually is smoking a cigar.
Yep. The place where I spent about a year in the Philippines in the early part of 2000s, and I had a housekeeper. And she would close the windows at night because she would say, "Oh, there's copper in the trees." And sure enough, I would smell cigar smoke sometimes. I'm like, "Yeah, okay, go ahead, close the windows." But you have the aswang, which is like a vampire. Have multos, which are ghosts. You have there's more that I can't think of, but just like you said, a lot of legends and monsters and almost like cautionary tales. Don't let your kids go outside, or this, that, or the other will snatch them. I have a lot of white ladies over there. Just about every island, I think, has its version of the white lady, which is just a lady in white that wanders after dark.
My goodness. It's wherever you go, you're going to get legends. Wherever you go, you're going to get the history, and those who decide they're not ready to go yet, or they're visiting, or whatever you want to call a ghost is, and just hanging around where they used to, hang around in life. Like you've got all these different bed and breakfasts now. What's your idea on that, Diane? I mean, have you heard of the term dead and breakfast? I'm sure you have.
Well, I have St. Augustine right up the road here, and basically they claim every bed and breakfast there is haunted. And it's just funny to watch how, as our culture has changed to where we are more embracing ghosts and people are finding out, hey, this is kind of a big business. It's amazing how many more beds and breakfasts are haunted all of a sudden. So I get kind of torn on this because I wonder how many of them aren't just doing it as kind of a marketing ploy.
Right.
But there are some that do have legitimate hauntings, it would seem. I'm more prone to believe them if I know somebody that stayed somewhere and had something unusual happen. So far, I haven't had anything happen to me at any of these beds and breakfasts, but it's a possibility. Like the Lemp Mansion,
Ooh.
big, haunted. Everybody talks about how haunted it is. I've been in it 3 times and I've never felt anything. I've never picked up an EVP. I've never had anything happen to me there. So I don't know. I wonder how much of it just really is a marketing thing.
Yeah, it's, very possible. It's funny how just in my lifetime, when we were kids, you would hide stuff like that. If you did have a ghost in a bed and breakfast or a hotel, you would
Absolutely.
hush hush. Now
Mhm.
they've turned the I just can't wrap my mind around it, but the Lizzie Borden house is a dead and breakfast. Basically, you can go in there, you can have the meal they had the last night, the mutton stew. You can lay on the couch that the poor man was bludgeoned to death in. You can sleep in one of the rooms. And I just got to scratch my head on that. I can't imagine wanting to do something like that, let alone offering to let some people do that. It's hard for me, I mean, how do you
One of
feel
the
about that?
things, I guess one of the things that I don't mind about it is if it is actually saving these historic locations. So
Okay.
I don't have a problem with them running a tour. It was very evident when I went into Waverly Hills Sanatorium that they are trying to restore that place. And they would show us the areas that had already been restored, and they're like brand new. They look great. And so it makes you feel better about going there and spending your money to do a hunt or to do a tour because they're actually putting it back into the building to make sure that it's still going to be there. So if they're doing something like that to keep the building there, I don't have a problem with it. If it's just they're doing it to make money, I guess then I would find it a little bit more questionable. As long as they're making sure that they're taking care of that building, I really don't have too big of an issue with it because it's not like they're forcing anybody to come there and spend their money.
True. It's true. It's very true. It's a good way of looking at it. I didn't really think about it like that as much. I was thinking more of it, exploiting the horror that happened, I guess it can be taken a little bit too far too when, you're selling keychains with a little hatchet on it and stuff like that. It's just like, oh gosh, what's up with that?
Yeah.
It gets a little...
Yeah, that kind of stuff is a little overboard, especially when you look at the history, especially with the Lizzie Borden house. I really have a hard time believing some of the stuff there because, Lizzie didn't die in that house.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't really understand why she would be there necessarily. So I sometimes wonder about that. And if you are marketing it along those lines, or if some of these T-shirts that you see that they're selling, some of the sayings they have on it, it's like,
yeah. Some of the. Have you ever gotten a chance? No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just saying, people lost their lives in a really bad way, so I don't know that you want to market that.
I agree 100%. 100%. One of my favorite places to go for many reasons. It's not far from me. I'm in New Jersey, so it's not far to Gettysburg. And you see it there a lot. I can remember going there as a kid, and it was very historical, of course. They had the cemetery, and they had the wax museums, and they had the museums, and you could go through the Jenny Wade house, the one civilian that was shot there, and different things like that. And then shoot forward 20 years, and I go, and now I can say honestly that Gettysburg is to ghost tours as the French Quarter in New Orleans is to bars. Everywhere you go, there is a ghost tour. You can literally stand. I just had Mark Nesbitt on not too long ago, and he started the first one. It was Candlelight. It's very, very classy, very, very lovely, historical candlelit ghost tour. It's very nice. But then you go, there's a couple of them that are just as you said. They're more of the macabre. They're really putting on with the the bleeding skulls and this and that and everything, and it's there's a market for it. It's out there. It is still part of history, and I can understand that. And it's brought life where there once was death. So much death, and they're making money, and they're probably not making as much as they need to even make the rent and things like that. So it's going to sell. And it's a change in, I guess, the way we look at things as well. People want to be scared. Look at the difference that Halloween itself has taken. Have you thought about that? You remember back when we were kids, the way Halloween was, and now it's, it's wonderful, but it definitely has taken some large steps up in the whole scare factor. It's more of the slasher, scary thing. I don't think you could get me in a haunted house at Halloween anymore because they really are. Or I don't want to say over the top, but they're definitely over the top of what I can handle, and I don't mind being scared, but they can be really scary. And I think that's just another thing that, we've taken, we've gone that far, movies and, whether it's a ghost tour or a haunted house, it's just amazing. It's a huge, huge business now in a lot of ways.
Well, let me address your comments on the ghost tours first. Is that you make a great point, because there are all different kinds of ghost tours out there. And of course, obviously I get asked by people all the time, I'm going to the city. Which one do you recommend? Have you been on one here? Mm-hmm. And I can tell you, if it is not based in history and like what you described that Mark Nesbitt does there at Gettysburg, I'm not interested. I did one in Boston, and you're thinking, wow, Boston's got to have some amazing ghost tours there. And I thought, I'll try this one. And it was jump scares. They had the zombie makeup on.
Oh, no.
And we were almost done with the tour. And I turned to one of the people I was with and I said, we actually haven't heard any ghost stories yet. They were talking about, different weird things and zombie stories and things like that. But they actually hadn't told us a single ghost story at any location yet. Mm-hmm. We'd gotten to walk through 3 graveyards at night, which was cool. Mm-hmm. But I was going, there's no ghost story. So we stop outside of one of the houses where the Boston Strangler, one of his victims, had been. And I thought, oh, they're going to tell us a ghost story here for sure. And they just basically said, oh, one of the Boston Strangler's victims was here. It wasn't until we got to the very last location that we heard a ghost story. And I thought, I just got on this trolley here and did all these jump scares and everything and didn't actually get what I felt was a quality ghost tour. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what you're addressing there, Cisco, is some of them are just getting into it for the marketing purposes and to be scary. And yeah, for some people, especially young people, there was a lot of young people on this tour. They probably loved it. Whereas I said it was one of the worst tours I'd ever been on. Mm-hmm. I think it's the same thing when it comes to, like you're talking about, the way Halloween has gotten now with all these, you pay, I don't even know. I haven't been in one in a while, $25 to walk through a big building and have people jump out and scare you. To me, I have better things to do with my money than that. And mm-hmm. I find it more creepy to walk around a graveyard or to go on a historical ghost tour and have a creepy story told to me than mm-hmm. going through someplace that's got limbs hanging from the ceiling and stuff.
I agree. How about you, Steve?
I'd like to ask Diane if she's ever been on any of the Dearly Departed tours in Los Angeles.
I'm so bummed. I have only been I went to LA, it was a couple months ago, and I was only there for one day. But I was like, if I'm going to be there for a day, I want to go to the Hollywood Forever Cemetery. Oh. So I'm walking through there and I look across the street and I see there's the building with Dearly Departed on it. And I went, oh God, I want to do one of those tours so bad. I haven't been, but I definitely want to.
Yeah. Scott Michaels is the guy that runs that. He's an amazing character. Got a nice little museum there too. Lots of artifacts and things. But like you said, he has the history in there. He has so many different tours. He has the Helter Skelter tour, which is all the Manson family stuff. The one called the Tragical History Tour. Just talks about various events and things that have happened in LA. There's like a Doors tour, a nasty Nellie Olson tour with Allison Angram that played Nellie Olson on Little House on the Prairie, rock and roll tour. It's amazing. The tours that guy's cooked up, and he does them right. Like you said, I've been on the ones where it's just like, this wasn't really a tour. This is just somebody walk along chatting with you and not really sharing that much.
Yeah, or you can tell that they're making up stories that just aren't true.
Yeah, and then, adding to, I'm with you guys. I would rather go in and hear the history. Now, I'll tell you something. I know I brought up Asbury Park earlier, but But at this point, I'm not going to do what the ghost tours have done. I'm going to give the listeners a little ghost story, and I'm going to give you one, Diane, too. This is the one that gets me. Now, Asbury Park, New Jersey. The history, I just can't even tell you. It truly was and if you haven't heard the episode on History Goes Bump, I just implore you, go back to my listeners and listen to all of them. But definitely listen to the one in Asbury Park, because there's just so much there. Like from the Mora Castle, that was just, very big tragedy, but there's so much more. When you walk through, now there are 1, 2, 3, I'm going to say at least 4 ghost tours in downtown Asbury Park. It's absolutely beautiful. And yes, there was a lot of music that came out of there. The Stone Pony is there. Bruce Springsteen, something that in the music scene that a lot of people don't talk about, and that's Upstage. And actually, I happen to be married to somebody that played at the Upstage from the age of like 13 on. That's where
Very
the
cool.
music scene. Oh, yeah. He actually spent... during the riots there was the riots that burnt down. It started in a furniture store, and it was the civil rights riots that had came from Newark and all around at that time, and in the late 60s. And I was sitting having a picnic with my mother in the next town over on the other side of the lake, and we saw it, all the smoke billowing. They were basically burning the town down. And my mom said they're burning down Asbury Park. And everybody just stood there. We didn't know what to do. There was so much came out of Asbury. We were all connected. My mother worked there at the Asbury Park Press. So not just what's happening in the town, but what's going to be left when it's over. That kind of thing. It just really, rippled through entire cities all around us. So I didn't know that my husband was at the Upstage when the riots started. And he was playing with a very young Bruce Springsteen at the time. I think Bruce Springsteen was probably 17, 18. They were playing on the stage, and somebody heard what they thought were firecrackers. And somebody yelled and said, "Hey, they're shooting off firecrackers out there." Of course, everybody runs out there to see. And one of the bouncers said to him, "That's not firecrackers, man. They're shooting." And he grabs my husband, Mario, under one arm, who's a big guy. I want to say 6'5", but I'm sure he was larger. And grabs a little Bruce Springsteen under the other, and he runs them up the stairs. And they spent the time 2 days on the roof at the Upstage in downtown Asbury Park. So, yeah, and watched everything because they couldn't get out. If you were in, you got stuck. So it's just like so much there, a lot of the old buildings are still standing now. When you go up just a couple blocks, you're, of course, on the boardwalk, the famous Asbury Park boardwalk. And it was absolutely marvelous as a kid going there. It was just the lights and the Ferris wheels and all the things you hear Bruce singing about in the songs, the tilt-a-whirl and, the carousel. I actually rode that carousel and grabbed those brass rings. It was amazing.
That is so cool.
Oh, it was an amazing time. And now you can go and take the ghost tours that'll walk you downtown. They have a booze and booze. So you go around to all the haunted bars and you can walk around. They tell you the history of each of the bars. So that's a really nice one. Then they have the one that goes along the boardwalk. And I was standing there. There's so much history in that. And having so much connection and growing up there, I had no idea Houdini's mother died in the hotel right there. Right on the boardwalk in the 1920s.
I didn't know that either.
I didn't either. We're all there's so much history that they give you on these tours that you can live there and not have a clue at the things that happen there. That's the kind of ghost tour you want to go on. Now, there's another one where you go up and you talk about the boardwalk, and here's your ghost story. I knew friends that had fallen asleep. Now, back then, you could go to see bonfires on the beach. You could fall asleep on the blanket and wake up and everything was fine. You can't do that anymore, but in the 70s, you could do that. People would fall asleep on the beach and come back, just get up, run, and tell you, on your next blanket, or come up on the boardwalk and tell you, "Man, you won't believe what just happened to me." They fell asleep on the beach and they'd be turned over and they could feel hands going through their clothes and searching their clothes, but nobody would be there. And it took me years to put it together from different stories Another acquaintance of mine had that experience, and when he was flipped over, he was looking right in the face of a ghost, what we called land pirates. Now, what they were, a lot of people have heard of moon wreckers or moon cursors or just plain wreckers. And they would tie a lantern to a donkey's tail in a very foggy night or stormy night. And the ships would think that it was okay to come that way, and they would wreck on the jetties and on the rocks. And people would jump off the ship and try to get to the shore. And a lot of times that was immigrants or people headed for Ellis Island. And when they fought their way through the surf and everything else and got to the land, these land pirates would basically knock them out and take all the money that they had sewn in their seams of their clothes and search through. And we have ghosts of wreckers now that people have seen. So I don't sleep on the beach anymore. Even when I was a kid.
Oh, I don't blame you.
Can you imagine? How creepy is that? I mean, the whole story is creepy. First of all, that people would do that to a ship, and, these poor immigrants coming over and they get that close to Ellis Island and something like that happens. But you've heard of wreckers too, haven't you, Steve?
Yeah, the Outer Banks area of North Carolina was rife with that. Same story. They would use a lantern basically to make ships think it was okay and then crash them on the rocks. That whole area is known as the graveyard of the Atlantic, and then they would plunder the ships and usually sink them or burn them to the water line. But it's very, very common. Anywhere there's port or water, they seem to have been in universal operation there.
Isn't that something? The things human beings do to other people, huh?
Yep.
I can't think of a better deterrent though, to get a young teenager that decided that it was a good idea to sleep on the beach to think about drinking again, because waking up with a hangover and having something like that happen to you.
Having a ghost go through your pockets, yeah.
That? How about that? So doesn't that make you want to come and visit Asbury Park there, Diane?
Well, I don't know that part does, but as you pointed out, it has a great history there. That's one of the nice things about mostly taking suggestions from my listeners, because I didn't know anything about the place. It would have never come across my mind to even look at that as a haunted historic place. And like you said, the history there is and there's so much of it in all different places, all different arenas, whether it's the music or the cruise ship or anything else that's going on there.
Absolutely. There's so much. There was even an episode, I believe it was on the Dead Files, where they have this one restaurant that just cannot stay open because there's something in there that just keeps ruining everything or, bothering people. And it's changed hands. I've lost count on how many different restaurants, and people still keep trying to put stuff in there and get a business going, and usually only lasts less than a year, so whatever's in that building, it's not good, and they've had multiple teams and, people going through there. That's an episode of Dead Files. It's a pretty creepy one. There's been a lot of deaths and stuff in that building. And like I said, people just keep trying, but some places, just like land, will have, whether you want to call it a curse, or you've had Native Americans go in there and say nothing should ever be built there. We don't go there and nothing should ever be built. But over time, things get built there, like developments or businesses or whatever. And, they even have creepy names. I know you've done episodes about things with the name like Devil's Den in Gettysburg or Devil's Stomping Grounds and things like that. And Steve, you know a little bit about that too, with all these different names for, I don't know whether the name came first or the stuff came first, but what do you think about that, guys?
Yeah, that's something that I've done some research on, but like you, I don't know whether it has, a devil name because of what happened there, or if being named that causes the negative energy and things to be there. But I've been to the Devil's Tramping Ground. There's several of them actually, but there's one that's well known near Siler City, North Carolina, and it's just like a big circle out in the woods where nothing will grow. And I've read that they've tested the soil. I think Duke University or somebody tested it, and the soil is sterile. There's absolutely no explanation for why it is like it is, and it's kind of sad though. It's the last time I was there. There was beer cans and graffiti on the rocks, and
Yeah.
people just come along and mess it up. But the first time I was there, it was creepy, and that's what I love about legend tripping. It's one thing to read about these places or take a tour, but when you go and find something on your own like that's out in the middle of the woods, something it has a special connotation for me, and I enjoy that aspect of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it isn't until you start putting in, devils and then haunted or legend or something like that. You have no idea how many places have devil or Satan or hell in their names. And when you start looking at these different locations, it's not just some name that they threw out because they wanted to make it sound scary. It's because there really is a legend that seems to be connected, and that's why they're calling it that.
Mm-hmm.
And so it does make you wonder if it's almost like, how we have all these ley lines everywhere. It makes you wonder if there's almost this devilish ley line, and all these hot spots seem to have, like, this is his tramping ground. He's claimed this one, he's claimed that one, or whatever, some evil spirit or whatever. Some kind of dark energy has claimed this spot.
I totally agree. Steve and I talk about that stuff all the time. I'm of Native American descent myself. I'm Cherokee and Lenape. And Steve is part Cherokee as well. And we look into that stuff all the time. And I can tell you that I've learned more camping out with elders and, sitting around the powwow circle and listening to them speak. And they say, you don't go off the trail. You don't go over here, you stay on the trail, and don't go over that area. And we learn that when they say it, we don't even ask why. We just don't go. We just don't go. But if you think about it, back in the day when there were still new settlers coming here and natives had their villages or their tribes or their area, and they would say, nothing should ever be on this land. And I can't tell you how much I'm hearing that come back now when we are doing the research and doing things. I just did a case not too long ago, Bothell Hell House with Keith Linder. And I've had multiple people looking into that land, and they said, man, this land is basically cursed. And I'm like, how do you even, it's just hard to wrap your mind around it, but the entire development, it's not just that house, it's everything in that area has got issues. So there's got to be something with the land, whether it was cursed or whether something bad happened there. But according to the Native Americans, it was always that way. And that's what a lot of these devils places, like, you said Devil's Tower and Devil's this and Devil's whatever. And that's just amazing. I don't know if it's something in the ley lines or if it's something in the energy or if it's just something in the earth, the makeup of the earth itself, a gathering of energy, so to speak. I don't know. It's amazing.
Absolutely, because like you said, it does generally, most of these names go back to a Native American tradition. And yeah, they're not calling them angel or peaceful or anything like that. So it's like there's got to be something making them say that this is an area we just don't go to.
Right. Yeah, I went onto the USGS website. They have a feature called the National Geographic or the Name Information Server, GNIS. And there's hundreds of places with devil or ghost or haunted in the name. I mean, Devil's Den, Devil's Gap, Devil's Slide, Devil's Lake, Devil's Canyon, Devil's Mountain. It's just, and they're everywhere. It's not, just out west, you kind of expect names like that, but it's all over the U.S. in different places.
Yeah. And then you hear also something that we laugh a lot about because, like I said, I'm here in New Jersey, and everywhere I look, I'll see Manahawking or Manalokin and all these different names because they basically, not to be ugly about it or anything, but they pushed the natives out, but they kept all the cool names. So,
yeah.
You know what I mean? And we laugh about it all the time, when you start getting into the different languages and stuff. And the last one that I just talked about in Bothell, Seattle, what was the name that you came up with? The was it the Kikitu? But it basically the name
Uh,
sounded wonderful, but it translated in the Native American language as "Land of the Dead." You know.
it's a
Uh,
little town just outside the Pinchot National Forest there that I had done some investigation. It's called Yacolt, Yacolt, and it literally means land of the demon or cursed land, whatever. And there's again that's the native name for it. And there's been all kinds of things there. There's a phantom train. There's a spook light. There's stories of people being chased by tiny Native Americans like 2 feet tall, and it's a weird little place. And that's the natives called it that for a reason. And there's certain tribes that avoided certain places, and then other tribes would avoid the whole place altogether. It depended on what their traditions were.
Yep.
And a lot of places are like that. The Superstition Mountains in Arizona are like that. The Smoky Mountains in Tennessee, North Carolina are like that. I have a lot of Cherokee friends, and there's places they will not go, and they'll tell you if you know what's good for you, you won't go there either.
Yep. And when people tell you that, it's like you've got this group of people and they say that's like going back to all the ghost tours and the different kind of haunted houses and things like that. It's like you'll have this group that'll go, okay, I'm not going in there. And then you'll go, okay, who's going with me? And you got this other half of the group that can't wait to go in there and find out what's going to happen. And that's just kind of the way, people are now. And, and that's okay. If that's your cup of tea, go ahead. But I can tell you a lot of people, it's just like something as silly as a Ouija board. We hear it all the time. Don't touch that. It's evil. It's just, it has nothing to do with the board. That's, we say it all the time. It could be dowsing rods, it could be a tarot card, it's just your intent and the energy that you're going into with it is what you're going to draw. That's just energy. It's just energy.
Yep,
It's
absolutely.
just energy. It's like other people can walk into a place. Like, I'm not a fan of going to the mall. I know people that work at the mall, that have no problem with it whatsoever. But when I go in, I'm just bombarded by all this heavy energy. I can go in
Same here.
I can go in,
Restaurants, the mall,
right.
anywhere there, even concerts.
Yeah.
There's an uneasy feeling I get sometimes just from the crowd. It's too people in. I just pick up too many vibrations.
Yeah. But like malls or, shopping, like large department stores and things like that, I have to get in and get out real quick. But I don't have any problem walking into a funeral home or
Yeah.
a graveyard or something. It's peaceful. There's something about the energy, and I don't know if that's the same with the land, but there's definitely, lands that are going to put off that different type of, I don't know whether it's, electromagnetic forces or whatever that causes and maybe draws some of this negative energy to it. I don't know, but there's way too much information out there for it to all to be just silly. There's something going on with that, and that's just amazing. It's just like haunted houses or haunted anything. Of course, at Waverly, you're going to have a lot of suffering, and a lot of anxiety and wondering each one of these different lives that were in there of what's happened to them. Basically, they were just dumped off. They couldn't deal with them. They dealt with people differently. Any kind of sanatorium. I mean, gosh, when you were sent to a sanatorium, you could have been sent there because you had epilepsy or.
Or I heard about a young girl that was sent because she wanted to marry into the wrong kind of family, and her parents didn't approve, so they put her in an insane asylum.
Can you
That's
imagine?
just inconceivable.
Yeah, that's a lot of pent up energy for all the wrong reasons. Just like I don't know how anybody could go. I just had Rob Guttrow on too, and he did a tour in England, and this is a medium who's taking a tour in England. So I'm like, okay, how you feeling? Because you imagine walking around in England with all that, with the castles and the Red Tower and all that. He wouldn't go to the tower, but the things that people used to have done to each other, and the torturing and the Salem witch trials and all that craziness. That's a lot of energy in any of those places. I don't know if I could walk into them. But then again, we might be walking into places like that we just don't know about, you know. And maybe some of these houses that are so haunted or do have a lot of issues are on a place like that and just
Mhm.
don't realize it, you know,
And
which
that's
is
the thing is you got to get in there and dig and do the research, and usually you can find out, where it started more or less.
yeah, yeah. I mean, and that's part of, what you're doing too, Diane, is you dig into the history of it. I mean, that's the whole point of your show where you dig down, you're trying to get as much information on the place as possible and seeing where these things linked in. Have you ever done anything on the Queen Mary, Diane, or any of the ships like that seem to be so seeped in the history?
Oh, yeah, we've done several ships. We've done the Queen Mary, the USS Lexington. There's a bunch of ships that are over in Maryland
Mm-hmm.
that we did.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, to me, the whole point of looking at the history, you might as well not investigate a haunting if you're not going to look at the history, because
True.
how in the world do you know what's going on there? You can't really. I mean, obviously, we can't prove hauntings because you can't take it and put it in a scientific room
Mm-hmm.
and with the scientific method have it continue to repeat itself in a controlled environment. I don't think it's ever going to happen with a haunting.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, one of the things that can help to validate it is if you have the history and then something happens. An example would be we go to Waverly Hills Sanatorium. We're on the ghost tour, and our guide is telling us that there was a homeless man that had lived there for a while. He was the only person in the building, and he lived there with his dog, and he would keep an eye on the place. So it was almost like he had this really good relationship that he had developed with the spirits there, and so he never really had any issues there. Well, these teenagers come in, and they're causing trouble, and they actually kill him and the dog.
Oh,
As the tour guide is telling us this story, all of us in the group hear audible whimpering of a dog.
oh no.
Now, if we hadn't heard that history, I could be sitting there going, well, that was a weird noise. I wonder if there's an animal somewhere in the building or if, something caught somewhere or if I'm hearing the hinges on a door squeaking or something. But because she was telling us that history and then we have the experience that went with it, it validated that experience for me.
Wow.
So I think if you're not going to look at the history, what is the point of even investigating a haunting?
Absolutely true. That's a perfect example. Well, now, Steve, write that one down too. I got to go to Waverly and help that dog now. He knew that was coming. He knew that was coming. I can't deal with animals being stuck. Oh, wow, that's amazing. Oh, bless that poor man.
I have to tell you, though, it's the coolest experience I've ever had in my life.
Yeah.
It was, and the whole reason why is it happened 3 times.
Oh.
And everybody heard it. So first of all, you have something that's audible, so it's
Right.
not an EVP.
Mm-hmm.
It was something we could hear, and that we all heard it. And so it was like, because at first I thought, did I hear that, or am I just hearing things? My brain is making up things because she's telling us the story about the dog.
Oh, man.
But the minute you know that there's 40 other people standing here with me that all went, I heard it. Yep, me too. It was like, wow. So to me, it was really amazing. I hate to think of something being trapped, like you said,
Mm-hmm.
but it may be that he's chosen to stay there too.
It
I
could
don't
very
know.
well be. It could very well be, or maybe the man is and the dog's just choosing to stay to help him.
Mhm.
Because
Sure.
animals are fantastic, no matter how you look at it.
Oh, absolutely.
In death and in life, they want to help us first. They think of us first all the time. They're amazing. Animals are. That's wild. Now, has that been the most? Would you say that's the most profound experience you've had, Diane, going on these trips, or have you had others? That's pretty darn profound. You'd have to be hard to top that one.
Yeah, to me, if people ask me what is the most amazing experience you've ever had, that is definitely it.
Wow, that's pretty darn.
I've
amazing.
had other really cool ones, but that one is, to me, that's the coolest one just because it was. I've been locked inside the lighthouse in St. Augustine, but it didn't feel like I was having an interaction with a spirit, even though it had to be a spirit that locked us in. There was no other explanation for it, and it's something that happens there all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But when you hear something that you can't see, it's because for me, I've never had the holy grail of seeing an apparition yet.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, this was the closest I could get to that.
Hmm. Pretty darn profound. You were locked in the lighthouse. You got to tell us about that.
So we do if anybody goes to St. Augustine, you have to do the Dark of the Night tour that they do at the lighthouse, because they let you walk around after you do the general tour with them. They let you walk around and do a little investigation on your own if you'd like to. So we had a group that was there, and half of us had gone in, and we'd already gone up to the top of the lighthouse at night, which is really cool because you get a great view. And we'd come back down, and there's some displays that are down on the bottom. So we were kind of walking through there. I had my recorder, and we were just looking at the different displays. And somebody had gone outside and said, I'm going to go ask a tour guide if I can go back up to the top of the lighthouse again. So she goes out, and me and another girl are standing there, and all of a sudden we hear this knocking on the door. And I was like, well, that's weird. It's because the door was propped open. So I'm like, okay, well, there shouldn't be a problem. So the knocking continues. So I walk over and I'm like, okay. So I go to open the door and it won't open. And I'm like, well, that's weird. It's almost like it's locked. And it had this little weird deadbolty thing that was kind of hanging loose. And I thought, well, gosh, did it break? And so we have a big guy on our side trying to pull it open. There's a big guy on the other side trying to pull it that way. We cannot get this door to budge. Here comes the tour guide. He puts his key in the deadbolt, turns it, and the door opens. And so we're like, okay, that was weird. And he goes, I have the only key. It's the only way you can lock that deadbolt.
Wow.
So we're like, something had to have locked it while we were in there.
Right.
And it's something that I guess happens quite often. They have, I don't know if you know the story there, but there were some children that, these were the children of the man who was building the lighthouse at the time, and they had these rails that would go down to where the ships would come in to help bring the construction material up. And the kids thought, oh, the cart, it's kind of like a roller coaster. So they would ride the cart down to the bottom of where the cart would stop, and it had these kind of like stoppers that were at the bottom there, so the cart would stop before it would hit the water. Well, one day as they were going down, I don't know if they had too many of them in there, because there were, I believe, 4 of them that were in it. And when it hit those stoppers at the end, it popped over them and into the water it went. And the cart came down on top of the kids. So it had them trapped in the water. And 2 of them drowned. And it was 2 of this gentleman's daughters had drowned. And then there was a little black girl who had lived somewhere in the area that had come over. I don't know if she was, if they had a servant there that she was the child of or something. And she had passed away as well. But it's these 2 girls, and one of them, her name is Eliza, and they think that it's the children who are just, having some fun with people. So they lock you in. They've tied people's shoelaces together.
Wow. How cool is that? I mean, it's sad.
But I will tell you,
happened.
Yeah. People will ask me, is this place haunted? Is that place haunted? And anybody who listens to the podcast knows every single episode is ended with, that's for you to decide. I've never told anybody this place is definitely haunted or whatever, but there are 2 places I will tell you that I believe are haunted, and those are the 2, Waverly Hills Sanatorium and the St. Augustine Lighthouse.
There you
I have no doubt that both have something, I don't know what it is, but there's something I can't explain going on there.
Yeah, yeah. And that's true. Every episode, you really do a great job on the podcast of just putting the information out there, getting the person your guest to say what they've seen, and you just dig into the history, and then you say, is it haunted? That's for you to decide. Because, you've always taken that stance. You say, you're basically a skeptic that, you want to believe and you want to see, but you haven't seen a lot. But you know what? That's a lot, Diane. I mean, if I had those experiences, that's great. Have you ever gotten any EVPs, or have you ever, had your hair pulled or anything like that? Because I know you go to a lot of different places. Have you ever had any of those, or that you just really couldn't explain, but you didn't have quite so many witnesses or anything like that?
Thankfully, I've never been touched. But I will tell you, I have great luck with EVPs. Most people have to listen to hours and hours and tape hours and hours, and then they might catch an EVP somewhere. I'll just walk around for 5 minutes and catch stuff. I don't know why I have such luck with it. Probably the scariest one I've ever picked up in Alton, Illinois. They do a ghost tour there, and they take you down underneath this building. I think it had been an apartment building at one time. Before that, it was a little small sanatorium where people had been there with tuberculosis, and now, of course, it's apartments. But there's this tunnel that's underneath it that used to be part of the Underground Railroad. And so you can imagine the energy that you're going to get down in this tunnel. So I'm down there with my recorder, and I listen to it after we get done with the tour. And as clear as day, Class A, a growl.
Oh.
And it was it didn't sound animal. It definitely sounded human, but it was a human type growl. So it just gave me chills. And I sent it to the guy who did the tour, and I said, have you ever had anybody pick up anything like this in there? And they have a really creepy story they tell about that tunnel. Mm-hmm. There seems to be something negative down there. Mm-hmm. And when he listened to it, he couldn't believe it either. Mm-hmm. I've caught other things too where, the one thing with EVPs is it's kind of like pareidolia. If you get certain words that come together when people are talking and then you're thinking it's underneath it, it could be people saying something that's an EVP, or it could just be the voices that were on top of it making it sound like there's an EVP underneath. Uh-huh. But the growl, there was no doubt because there was nothing in front of it or behind. I mean, it was just all by itself, and it was like, whoa. And then there's a torture museum they have there. And I could not hear what I picked up, but I stuck my recorder through the gate that was there, and you can hear whispering. And there was nobody else there. It was just me, and there were some people off in the distance, but you could tell that it was coming from in that room, and you could hear something like, please God, and then somebody else saying something else, and I was like, whoa.
Oh, my. And doesn't that just give you the chills when you get something like that? Because when you have your, because I've had that happen. Thankfully, I've never had the growl, but you wonder how close, what was it, first of all? Why you, and basically how close was it when it did that, and what was it? That's just, there's so many questions that pop up when you have something like that happen. But, I'm almost grateful at this point I can't see it, but then you wonder, you're just doing something like that, you wonder how many things are right there that we don't see all the time. Okay, we're back. We're recording. Okay, I get the message, guys. Please don't do that to me again, all right? I just, that was spooky. I don't even remember where we were talking about the EVPs. And,
yes.
And then you basically, I don't want to say it again, but that, it makes you something is right close to everything just went. But that's so weird because my cell phone too. Everything just boom. Just wow.
Okay, that is really weird.
Yeah, if you got your cell phone in there too. Yeah,
it's not just the electric; it was the cell phone as well. So, just in case it happens again, I'm really nervous now. Oh, thank you guys for hanging in there. It has certainly been a crazy electric nonsense tonight with everything uploading, and I appreciate your patience so much. So, back to the EVPs. You said that was probably you're amazing at getting these EVPs, and I don't know whether that's just because you're open. That could very well be that, or that you're just, they're just giving you a little something to show you. So that's pretty amazing, that you're getting these good EVPs, because I know people, like, I think we were talking about the different equipment that's out there, like the Ovilus, and that other one with the white noise. I can't get into those because it's like matrixing for your ears, that you're straining to hear things. I like the EVPs where you ask a question, what is your name? And you get a clear voice that says, John, like in real time and stuff like that. They're a little bit more believable. What you heard in a group of people with, 40 people hearing the dog, that's amazing. That's absolutely amazing. So I guess it hasn't deterred you from getting out there and continuing to do what you do, Diane. I think it's wonderful what you're doing. I wish I could do like you and get in an RV and go to different places. I hear now that you're in Florida. You're close to Disney, are you not?
Have you? Yeah, I'm about About a 25-minute drive for me.
Okay. Have you heard anything about the different haunting things that they've got going on? Do you think that that's kind of hype, or what do you feel about that? We've seen a lot of stuff that they're getting on the security cameras and things like that. What do you know about that, since that's right there kind of in your hometown there?
Well, I haven't really looked into Walt Disney World as much. We did do an episode on Disneyland, and they definitely had some stuff going on. But what I find interesting is when you hear stories, it's the rides that are at both places that seem to be the ones that have hauntings. Like, both of them claim that their Pirates of the Caribbean ride is haunted. And so both of them claim that their Haunted Mansion rides are haunted. So when they're making claims like that, it does make you go, well, I wonder, can that be possible at both places? Now, granted, one of the reasons why the Haunted Mansion might have an issue is, for some reason, people think it's a good idea to take loved ones' ashes in there and sprinkle them around.
Right.
Mhm.
Now, the minute you do that, they see you on camera because they can see everything that's going on. They have to shut down the ride, and then, I don't know, maybe you think your loved one is going to enjoy the afterlife hanging out in the Haunted Mansion, but they're actually going to be in the dust bin because they will vacuum them up. And then they've got to, go
never
through
thought
and,
of
and
that.
sterilize everything.
Wow, I never thought about that. Yeah, I've heard a lot of people do that, but you're absolutely right. They catch everything on camera. Of course they would. It's, Disney. There's cameras everywhere. That's
The
amazing.
most convincing thing I've seen, and you may have seen it, Cisco, is security camera footage. It's after the park is closed, and it shows, looks like a spectral figure walking out of the Haunted Mansion, comes down the walk through the gate, which is closed, and then continues on down the street there at Liberty Square.
Well, and the thing that's really cool about that, Steve, is they caught it on 4 different cameras.
Mhm.
So you're getting it from 4 different angles, which was what really convinced me of that. And then when it gets down to the end of what the road area is, to me, it looks like it's actually starting to walk across the water there, too.
Mhm.
Phew. Wow. Something
Creepy
else.
stuff.
Yeah. Well, like we said, it's definitely, they're
And
definitely
there
all over.
are people that have died there. Disney will deny
Sure.
it, but
Yeah.
what they do at the one in Florida, they take them across the street to the hospital at Celebration, which is the town that Disney built, and they declare them dead there. So
Yeah.
you can get chopped into pieces on the Wedway People Mover, but they're not going to declare you dead till they get you over to the next town across the street. Now, that's what I've heard. I worked for Disney at one time, and that was the rumor among the other cast members there that officially nobody ever died at the happiest place on earth.
Wow.
Well, you might be right, although I guess nowadays it's a little harder for them to do that because occasionally workers or cast members do get killed on the rides and stuff, and that does get reported in the news. So I don't know if Disney officially says they died here, but
Isn't that something? So you've got, and we're right back like full circle again. We've got the bed and breakfasts and the different motels and different places that are just putting it in the brochures. We have ghosts. Come on and see us. We're haunted.
Maybe they'll embrace that. They had Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween. Maybe they'll have a really scary Halloween.
I don't know. And then you've got the ones that are still pushing it away and saying, no, we're not. There's nothing to see here, folks. There's no ghosts here. So I guess it hasn't come completely around again, but there'll always be people like us digging into the stories and wanting to pull out the good ones. And I just thank you so much. I'm so nervous now. For the listeners who don't know what just happened, as soon as I said they are all around us, boom. All the electric went out of my house. My cell phone died. Everything that had any electronics to it whatsoever went completely dead. And I had to get them back, so I'm so nervous that it's going to happen again. And before it does, I just want to thank you both for a lovely evening and spending the time telling us a little bit about the history and all the ghosts and stuff that we love so much. And Diane, tell us a little bit about your podcast and where to find you and all the wonderful things going on at History Goes Bump.
The name of the podcast is History Goes Bump, and so you can find it at historygoesbump.com, and I'm on all of the different social media out there except for Snapchat. I haven't jumped into that yet, even though a lot of young people have been pounding me. Come on, you got to get onto Snapchat. But if you look at History Goes Bump on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, you'll find me.
Okay, and we can find the episodes on probably most podcatchers. I know you're on Stitcher. And
yeah, iHeartRadio, Spotify, everywhere. If you can listen to a podcast, I'm there.
It's wonderful. And you're almost up to, gosh, what number is it now? You're almost hitting 300. You're getting close, right?
Yeah, tomorrow 266 goes up.
Wow, that's amazing. Oh, that's something to be so proud of. And every single one of them is fantastic. If you've not heard it, I totally what are you doing? Get out there and listen to this podcast because it's absolutely fantastic. And we love that you were here with us tonight, Diana. Sorry for all the technical issues, but there just might be somebody trying to tell us, yep, we're right here with you. We're listening. So what a better time for it. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. And Steve, as always, tell them where to find you, love.
It's always a pleasure. I'm on Facebook, Steve Stockton 81, I think is the handle that I use on there. My books are on Amazon Kindle exclusively right now. And I'm also on Twitter, Strange, Odd, and Curious is my Twitter handle.
So cool.
But Facebook is the best place to reach me. And then all my books have my email address at the end. I love to hear from readers and fans. A lot of people share their stories with me.
Fantastic.
And Diane, it was a pleasure. I love the podcast. I spent all day yesterday listening to several episodes, and it just left me wanting more. It's fantastic.
Well, thank you very much. It was great to meet you, Steve, and you as well, Cisco. I really appreciate the opportunity to join you guys.
Oh, thank you so much, and thank you for putting up with all the technical issues. But then you never know. Sometimes a podcast goes bump, too.
Oh, I've had my issues, so I certainly can't give you any grief about it.
Thank you all so much, and you all have a blessed and wonderful evening, and definitely keep your feet under the covers tonight, because I think they're pretty active out there tonight. Okay, guys? Take care.
Okay, you too.
Bye-bye.
Bye, honey. I'll tell you, listeners, that was a fun episode. From start to finish, we were having such electronic issues, from computers just deciding to upload out of nowhere right before we started. We were having things crashing. I don't know what was going on in this episode, but I'll tell you what happened. As soon as we were talking about Diane's EVP that she got, and we were talking about the growl, and I was trying to paint a picture verbally about you're standing there, you have a recorder, and something growls into your phone, and you pick up the EVP, and you didn't know it was there when it did it, and how thankful we are at the time. I said something along the lines of, they're there all the time. They're always around us. They're surrounding us all the time. At that point in time, my electric completely went out. My cell phone completely was drained. Everything around me, the only thing that I had, one computer on my left-hand side went completely out. It's plugged in. It was supposed to have battery. The only thing that stayed on were the candles I had on around me and the laptop in front of me that I was recording on. And I really quick reached out to try to save it so we didn't lose the episode. It must have had some battery left. And as soon as I saved it, that one went to. I mean, it just loaded as a save, and then boom. And I'm running around the house, going to the breaker, doing this, trying to get my phone to recharge on a charger I have, just to get enough to call them back to finish up the episode. So apparently there was something here that wanted to say, that's right, we're right here around you. Because when I started the conversation, that was probably an hour and 15 minutes, I started the phone with 100% power. And when it went out, it was less than 1. I had to charge it a little bit just to get them back on the phone at 1%. So something happened tonight. So if you have your own I'm still shook up. It was kind of crazy. I have to go get a beer and sage. So anyway, if you have your own experience with the uncanny and you want to tell us about it, please send an email to journeythroughthegate@gmail.com. You can also become a member on our Gatekeepers on our Facebook page. That's a great discussion page where we put all our different experiences and talk back and forth. It's lovely. Come on in. And just let us know, and you might be a guest on here too, and you can have the same experience that Steve and Diane had. You never know what's going to happen here on this side of the gate. It can be pretty wacky. I thank them both for being so patient and getting through all the electronic and obviously somewhat uncanny experience this evening. They're both delightful people. Steve, as you know, you can find his books on Kindle. They are Strange Things in the Woods and More Strange Things in the Woods, My Strange Life, and all the ones he's currently writing. And Diane's podcast, History Goes Bump. We cannot thank her enough for being here this evening. It's a wonderful quality podcast. I highly recommend it. And it's just fantastic listening to all the history. So thank you so much, dear listeners, for putting up with this episode. And I'm going to leave it just as it is because this is how it happened. So thank you very much. And don't forget, because they're obviously all around us, keep your feet under those covers. Keep your closet door shut, because there are things that go bump in the night. Good night, dear listeners.